who's actually going to get the most out of a Zumex Multifruit Centrifugal juicer, and who would be better off putting their money toward a simpler countertop blender. If you're wondering whether the price tag feels justified for a family that drinks juice every morning, or if you're a solo health nerd who only squeezes a carrot now and then, stick around. I dug into what this machine really does for everyday people. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first thought about a centrifugal juicer, the image that kept popping up was the classic kitchen counter showdown: a bulky motor, a noisy whir, and a mess of pulp that ends up in the trash can. The worry most buyers share is ending up with a piece of equipment that looks great on a shelf but turns out to be a daily inconvenience. That's why I spent a few evenings watching how people actually set up their breakfast stations, reading what's been posted about similar models, and even asking a couple of friends who own the same brand how it handled their weekly juice routine. The core question isn't just does it extract juice, but does it fit into my morning flow without adding extra hassle? The Zumex Multifruit is marketed as an all-fruit solution, which already hints at a broader target audience than the single-fruit-focused juicers you see on infomercials. If you're the type who likes to toss together a mix of apples, oranges, and a handful of leafy greens for a balanced drink, this machine's wider chute and higher pulp tolerance could be a real advantage. On the flip side, if you're only interested in orange juice or you're content with a basic hand-pressed glass, the extra cost may not bring enough incremental benefit. In practice, the juice output feels consistent across a range of produce, from firm apples that normally take a while to break down, to softer berries that can turn into a soggy mess in the wrong centrifugal system. The Zumex motor seems calibrated to keep the speed just high enough to cut through fibers without pulverizing everything into a pulp-filled slurry, which is a subtle but noteworthy point for people who hate texture in their glass. Now, let's break down who should definitely consider this juicer. First, families with kids who are picky about texture tend to appreciate the smoother finish that comes from a centrifugal process that separates pulp more efficiently. If you have a teenager who insists on a daily green juice because it makes them feel like a superhero, the machine's ability to handle kale, spinach, and even wheatgrass without choking is a real selling point. Second, the health-conscious cook who likes to prep a batch of juice on the weekend and store it in the fridge will find the large feeding tube a time saver. You don't have to chop everything into bit-sized pieces. Finally, people who already own a basic blender and use it for smoothies but want a dedicated juice extractor to get rid of that stubborn fibrous layer will notice the cleaner separation, which means less sick feeling after a heavy green drink. Who should skip it? If you're on a tight budget, there are centrifugal models that sit comfortably under $100 and still produce decent juice for occasional use. The Zumex sits in a higher price bracket, and its premium isn't just about the finish. The black housing looks sleek, but that's largely aesthetic. Also, apartment dwellers who can't afford the occasional louder whine should be cautious. The motor's power translates into a sound level that can border on a kitchen blender's roar. If you need a silent operation for early morning juice before anyone else is awake, you might look at masticating or slow press models, even though they're typically slower. Finally, and this is a common misconception, the jug you get isn't magically larger than the standard. If you're hoping to fill a half-gallon container in one go, you'll still need to run a couple of batches, especially with denser produce like carrots. The practical strengths of the Zumex Multifruit are easier to articulate when you picture a typical weekday breakfast routine. The large feeding chute means you can slide whole apples, plums, or a handful of berries straight into the machine without spending extra time on prep. The juice collector is designed with a spout that lets you pour directly into a glass or a reusable bottle, which cuts down on extra dishes. Those who are environmentally conscious will appreciate the fact that you aren't wasting pulp. You can repurpose it for compost, pet treats, or even add it to oatmeal, which adds a tiny but tangible sustainability bonus. Another hidden advantage is the ease of cleaning. The parts are dishwasher safe, and the mesh filter can be rinsed quickly. You won't be wrestling with a tangled net of fibers that clings stubbornly to the interior like in some older models. On the downside, there are a couple of trade-offs that only become obvious after you start juicing regularly. The centrifugal action does generate a fair amount of heat, especially if you run the machine for more than a few minutes at